Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is to look at a little bit more in depth on the dominance bond that a psychopath will use on their children. In other words, sort of using and manipulating their children as an object to either, displace their boredom, displace their frustration, display their shallowness or absence of emotion, and manipulate and control them, especially as it deals with someone who might be female psychopathic. So when we talk about someone who is female psychopathic, we're talking about someone who will oftentimes use this as sort of as a sexism, as a point of contention or manipulation. In other words, using their femaleness, their position as a female, to sort of dominate a relationship, dominate a situation, dominate a community, dominate a family, dominate a workplace, to be the one who's the sort of center of attention. Oftentimes it can be perceived as a matriarch, someone who, is, taking others to the whipping post, getting everybody in shape. They might be viewed as an authoritarian, a disciplinarian. There's a whole spectrum of parenting styles. But when we talk about someone who is, psychopathic, they are really truly objectifying and have a deliberate and calculated demise towards the people, the children, and sort of having no sort of bond, of attachment, of warmth or connection, and really even more so because there's a lack of conscience, they don't really experience a sort of remorse or regret when they have hurt the children. So there's no real sort of learning curve that takes place in a relationship with a female psychopath. When, for example, if you hurt the child, they might say, "Mom, you hurt me." And, you just, there is no discussion of feelings. There's no guiding of, especially the uncomfortable feelings of being lonely, of being shy, of being bullied at school, of, not being able to play with kids, or things of that nature where children need to, learn how to share toys or how to deal with their own temper, their own emotions, their own need for sleep and food and companionship and growing and having a sense of themselves, that sort of becoming industrious versus inferiority, that sort of stage in development where people, the children either learn to be autonomous or dependent, and then basically through the next, which is industrious or inferior. And so, usually you need a parent, particularly it's going to be the mother, who's quote unquote the one with the emotions, the nurturing, who's usually not the main breadwinner, who's there to help guide, shape, mold the child and help them to direct and protect. And then the father is supposed to be, the other provider, is there to provide the resources, is there to guide and protect, there in sort of the more pressing matters. But the female psychopath, is devoid of conscience. They're devoid also of regret or remorse. So if they've hurt the child, it's not really retained in their memory. They have, based on how they're wired, their prefrontal cortex is slowed in activity. So the area of the brain that's responsible for having a moral compass, for having, this is, a right way for me to protect my family, which is supposed to be one of the most sacred, bonds that you'll ever have, is the family unit. It is truly the source of all sort of interactions and development in that person's stage of their life. How they interact and how they're treated and how they feel they were treated. And that first unit goes on to really have a telltale development for how they are then in other social or employment settings or other relationship settings. They are tending to maintain the same role and play out and act out the same, that they received instruction to become. So if there's a lack of connection, a lack of warmth, a lack of learning, there's going to be this sort of real vast gap in feeling that there's a real lack of really true connection or warmth or bond. It's going to feel it's just sort of non-existent, that it's not there, it's not present, it is not felt. a female psychopath, because of this sort of lack of conscience and their the amygdala, which is also the aspect of the brain that's responsible for fear and emotions and sort of that fight or flight, is oftentimes very cold. It's sort of very fearless. And so it can be manipulated as, or viewed or manipulated by them as how they show as to be a very strong woman. And so it can then be supported and acknowledged and validated. Validated meaning supported or recognized and applauded by others. Here's this strong woman, who did all this on her own, and the kids were bad, so it can be reflected along the wrong decision. But there's, the objectifying, just sort of feeling that you're, it's not real. The relationship is not real, or you feel that the children feel that they don't really know them. You don't get a chance to know me, and isn't this the relationship where you're supposed to get to know me and help me to know myself and learn and grow and develop the skills, not only to support myself financially, but also the social skills that we learn, through parent and child instruction in those moments of learning. So there can feel like there's this shame that can be associated with having a relationship with as the mother of as the female psychopath, because there's this lack of emotional connection that can't be feigned or faked. Feeling then the child will misinterpret this as there's something inherently wrong with me. I've created this. I lack heart. I lack intelligence. I lack connection with others. So they then interpret that relationship, and then so in order to keep some semblance of connection, they have to then sacrifice their I am to then, somehow try to get closer, either through bad behavior or some behavior, have some sort of connection with this parental figure who is, really does not have just sort of the very values that you would think a mother should have to raise a child. They don't have love. They don't sort of have fear that their children are going to be hungry or unprotected. So they have a fearlessness, sort of just, what oftentimes is felt as cold or callousness. Yet they're sort of seductive. They're sort of attention getting in a different way, where even though the child isn't getting what they need, there's a feeling that you can then sort of satisfy their needs through either yelling or, paying attention to the mom, or then serving the mom's needs and sort of just gelling into this sort of their background, and just being sort of a prop or a pawn to them, where, children then feel, misled, but they must maintain that in order to have some connection with this parent. And so I think a lot of dissociation is then felt because they're not able to live, and then you can, some very sort of strange behaviors can go on in the household as well. Constant shaming, sort of setting you up for failure, that this is their home and it's not yours. So feeling that you can't even live in your own skin, I think, is part of the psychological trauma in the dominance bond that is set up with psychopaths and their children, which is very different than you'll see, I think, with them in the adult world, because they're going to manipulate others to either rise the ranks or get whatever it is they want, contacts, whether they want an office, whether they want relationships, data, to move up in the ladder. They'll break, sacred, connect, they'll just sort of break the rules, so to speak, and not really feel bad or that they've done anything wrong because of just how they're wired. So they can, once again, they can be viewed very positively, and then the children sort of, in order to maintain and sort of survive, then sort of idealize them, and then sort of feel that that they get their identity from this person rather than having their own identity. And so they don't get the experience of feeling that they're living a full life, that they're sort of an absentee. They're sort of here, but they're not here, just sort of feeling very vacant. That they just feel that they don't have life to them, that they're going to you know, maybe just sort of dissipate, and what's the other word? Just sort of the word that I'm looking for is when someone just sort of dissipates. You know, their lives just sort of fizzles away. They don't have any steam, momentum, desire, or passion. That whole area, I liken it to like an engine that hasn't been the starter. The crank hasn't been turned on. You know, the key hasn't flipped the ignition. Can be the feeling that I used to equate, I think, for children who have been raised by someone who's psychopathic, feeling that they don't exist, feeling that they can only learn half of their schooling. They can never really get it all. They can't process it all because they can't own it for part of the skills that they need to be able to see their own future. So a psychopath is a parent. You know, a crucial aspect of parenting, I feel, is to have a vision for your child, to have an expectation for your child, and then reinforce it, and then make sure that they get all the steps leading up to that success. So, you know, in not only being able to, you know, learn their curriculum, but also in relationships and their interests, and develop their extracurricular activities as a well-rounded person. You know, but I feel that as a relationship with a female psychopath who's the parent, they cause sort of a splintering or a fractioning or a splicing, you know, I would say, within the individuals, the children, because they're not allowed to realize their dream. That's part of their dominance bond. And to hold them down in a way so that they, you know, they will keep them just sort of in that sort of fraught state. Dissociated meaning not being able to sort of identify with their own instinct, their own free will. You know, what makes them unique, what makes them them, how they feel about themselves, who they feel that they are, and being able to have, you know, and know who they are, but also have a mentor. In other words, someone to look up to. And, you know, it's important, I feel, in recovery and in life that you have a mentor, and that also the people who you associate with create like a mastermind. In other words, they help you to grow, to consider some different angles, to, you know, develop different parts of yourself or enrich your appreciation. You know, it's a two-way street. And I feel that experience is truncated or cut off for the children, because a psychopath, they don't really have that sort of visionary aspect, the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for learning, that's responsible for structuring a vision for your life moving forward, and be able to pursue the dream, you know, the I want, and then let's go for it, and then let's make this happen. They don't allow a child to experience that, or how to develop that within themselves. They don't have a vision for them to follow, which is what a child needs. They need the eyes of their parent to sort of see where they're going for them, and then this is where you're going, and then so that they make it on their own feet. A psychopath will violate this need just out of sheer just not valuing it. I feel they don't understand the value, and they don't feel remorse, you know, that they've, you know, laughed at their children when they're down, or that they're failing. You know, they'll more, you know, reinforce sort of negative traits of them. You are, you know, this and that, and, you know, just grind them down. You know, it's part of the brainwashing. They're going to beat them down rather than raise them up. This is setting, you know, kids up for failure unless they get away from this very toxic influence. And I think because, you know, the main role of the female psychopath is to reflect back that warmth, you know, reflect back that love, that sort of, you know, that real just sort of the love that is unconditional, and it just sort of doesn't take a lot of energy. It's just sort of always self-sustaining. You know, the Mother Earth that's there to flourish and grow, and also will take the bad times, but then will, you know, allow for the restart and regrowth. You know, that's part of the divine feminine. And so the children are going to sort of suffer, and then in order to maintain the connection, meaning that the suffering then becomes one with connection, meaning that in order for me to have any sort of connection with this sort of chaos of emotions, or it's not even a chaos of emotions, it's a chaos of behavior. which oftentimes they feel outside of the behavior of this person. In other words, they're in the same home, they're providing and a caregiver, but they give them a sense of that they're not really, it's an etheric energy, I think, that the children then are sort of deprived of, or it's an emotional asphyxiation, sort of not giving them sort of this emotional climate that is one with warmth and connection, eye contact. There's this sort of feeling of coldness or isolation in the own home, the own family system. And so the child then, has to value connection because, if you're not connected to this parent, if they don't value you or they don't see you, then you're not going to get food, you're not going to get a desk, you're not going to get a pencil, you're not going to get a pillow, you're not going to have any communication, you're not going to have anyone to talk to, who's got the vocabulary, who's got the more mature thought patterns that can, assist you in your growth. You don't live in a vacuum. I think children, who are raised by female psychopaths, or even male psychopaths, it's like they're existing in a vacuum that no one else gets, but it's a feeling of vacuous or emptiness that has been sort of leached from them in a very covert way. And so, and then the result then is a dissociative state, meaning just sort of not really feeling sort of an unreality about their own being. And sort of dissociating meaning just sort of checking out, just sort of numbing out, emotional freezing out the fact that they don't have, this sort of connection or nice treatment. It doesn't mean that it can be violent but it can lead to physical or sexual abuse, which is a complete objectification of another being, meaning that you're just an object, you're there to be an outlet for my impulses. You're there for me to unload my baggage. You're here to clean the house. You're there to be a receptacle for my negativity. You're there to, try to manage my chaos, and to then fend off this fear and uncertainty and unpredictability that can come with a psychopath. And then there's just sort of deranged or flipping of meaning of things where, things aren't quite, they don't have an emotional connection, holidays, church upbringing, patronage to your flag, whatever it is, there's going to be oftentimes a loss of emotional connection, but then a feeling of loss or sorrow that causes the child then to always be on the child's mind. The child is always thinking then about the parent. How do I repair this? How do I fix this? What do I need to do to help and, put this back together? They then try to figure out with their little immature minds how to put this person back together again and create a semblance of a relationship. So then the roles are then flipped where the child is having to be the adult. Don't do that, do this. Why don't you try, they're the ones who are trying to guide and then step into the position of what is necessary. They're becoming, parents before their time, and then play seems forbidden or guilty because, especially if the problem is still there, they're chronically exposed to this threat, and so it becomes a chronic, and then, they can enter the Stockholm syndrome where basically, they're identifying with their abusers and feeling like the abusers are right. You are right to mistreat me. Of course I am this awful character. I'm this awful child. Of course I've got all these guilty, dark things going through me, and they're just kind of placing these within. They're planting seeds of gaslighting, that you are this horrible person, or, you're just this to me, and you're just here to clean, or you're here to do this, and you're not really sort of in the right developmental stage. So completely bypass certain developmental stages for their children, and the children must keep marching on. So there's part of them, I think, that numbs it out and then says, I have to be an adult too soon, and then try to get into positions of authority or attention to sort of fill up that warmth that they need. So they might become the class clown or the class rebel, or be defiant, operational defiant disorders, where they're just really unruly. And so they're acting out then, the psychopathic mistreatment. They're, they're not abiding by the rules. They're violating boundaries. They're violating standards. They're acting insensible without connection to right or wrong and their own conscience. So the conscience then needs to be developed out in the world. That's going to be their best ally if they can then reconnect with situations, relationships, and opportunities for value-based and learning missions, and then productivity, and then how they can be of value. And maybe they're, then see how they fit into other cogs or other systems, and not just a dysfunctional family system. So it's important to sort of spin away from that damaging center and sort of realize that that is not your true core, your true center. It was something that experienced, it's just kind of the way I envision it. It's like you're just sort of all of a sudden in this dark ocean, just sort of, thrown around like a cold, mechanical ocean that's just sort of throwing you. And then all of a sudden it just throws you on this island, and you just go splat and go, whoa, how did I get here? But I'm here, so you kind of find that you're somewhere, and you need to build up and develop from there. And that, so children can feel like children in an adult body if they've been raised by female psychopaths. So it's important then you learn techniques of, reparenting and championing your inner child. The work of John Bradshaw is fantastic. Reclaiming and championing your inner child. Homecoming. If you have not got that book, if this is, a situation where you or a family member has another family member who is psychopathic, and as a child was raised in the setting, I would highly recommend getting that book and then watching the series on YouTube here. PBS had a fantastic series. I think there's maybe 6 all in all that you can watch and then take in, and it's really wonderful, workshop style. And the book is great reading. He's got several other books, Toxic Shame. He's a great resource. He was really one of the pioneers in this area. Once again, it's important to have a mentor, someone who you can look up to, and then sort of have these sort of needs for close connection and trust that is non-threatening. Because the children, I think, who are raised by the psychopaths, is different than if it's a spouse. But I think that they feel then that, life in the world becomes always a very threatening place. It becomes very forbidding. They sort of lack a center of trust, and so can identify with the wrong groups. They weren't able to identify with the values, so then their children can be very impressionable, and then find their way, because they're vulnerable. They don't know how to erect their own boundaries and sort of go after their dream, and so they can be easily just derailed, made vulnerable by negative influencers. And then find themselves with the wrong crowd, addicted to substances, addicted to gambling, just having a tough go at it, chronic unemployment, run-ins with the law, relationships that are dysfunctional, and then, are with this up and down. So it's like the thrill of the chase, and then the thrill of the loss, and then it's just, it becomes an intermittent cycle, and it becomes only survival. And until one says, I've had enough of this, this is, too much negative influences riding over in my life, and I want more. I know that life offers different opportunities and different perspectives. So children of psychopaths need to, I feel, learn about what a psychopath is, learn what that type of person is like, what their behaviors are like, to help explain what they have witnessed and what they have, absorbed, and to then begin to associate better attachment with themselves and have a positive reference within themselves, and be able to connect that with others and other opportunities in life, and sort of, let go of those sort of monstrosities, no matter how horrible, that can be integrated within, and just, owned that this happened, but it doesn't have to be the center and core of your life. It can be there, and it can be just sort of part of, a cocoon that you eventually break off from, and then you eventually just break through, and then it's no longer a part of you. It was there as a defense mechanism to sort of protect you, but then you can allow it to shut away as you do this work that we discuss here. But yes, you do need to learn about the psychopath, learn about sort of why they do what they do, or how they're different rather, and not mimic them, and realize that you don't want to be a counterforce to their force. They're not a good polarity to bump up against. You know, when we talk about good and bad and trying to, you know, use them and sort of, you know, I think a lot of people who have been through relationships with psychopaths, they want to then live their life proving that they are the opposite. So in other words, you didn't love me, you know, when I was a child, and look how well I love children. And so they want to then, you know, work with children, or work with the disadvantaged, or work with the needy or the homeless, to show, you know, so they're trying to prove to their abuser that they're all this, when they really need to start living life within, and not living to prove and justify something, because that is then wrought with defenses, and it won't be self-sustaining for the long run, because it's based on, you know, trying to prove to a counterforce that oftentimes does not lead to closure. It oftentimes keeps you stuck in the trauma bond. It keeps you stuck in that whole energetic field, when it's time to say, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, not going back, you know, erase the GPS, because that ain't, you know, a target on my go-to. You know, I am not starting that journey back there no more. That, you know, the bus don't go there, no, you know, no more. You know, Jesus dropped off his shoes there, let it be. You know, just allow that whole different realm and domain to exist in life. It doesn't mean that you have to tap into it, be part of it, struggle, battle, and fight it. You don't have to live an inauthentic life. You can live a life that you identify with yourself, and you identify with your I am, and you're not persuaded by the red flags. You know, you're not missing the red flags anymore, either within other people or yourself. You're going, nope, I'm not being fooled anymore by, you know, I know I'm going to now err on the side of right. So children need to go through that development and then find their own gauge, their own inner compass that they can be responsible for, and not, you know, just be statistics that are, you know, caught by the law in the prison system, and, you know, operational defiant disorder, or just other acting out because they don't have any sort of upbringing or way to make their way in the world in a positive nature. So it really, they're going to need to do some character shaping from within, which I think can be very satisfying. And you can restore yourself, you know, to a better, stronger perspective, because you own it, because you took yourself there through the journey. So, you know, for myself, who've done, you know, decades of study to show exactly what it takes to restore health and normalcy and functioning and love and light, where oftentimes there was the absence of that. And so, you know, having seen these dynamics in families, I know exactly the offshoot and how it sort of derails people in sort of, you know, spiraling out of control, but sometimes into control. So it can be a whole very complicated outcome, aftermath of this, but it can be reconciled. It can be integrated. It can be incorporated and made into one whole that is then set up with a priority and direction that is based on wisdom versus reacting to a damaging relationship. So I think the children ultimately need to be able to grow, you know, and just sort of separate themselves from the body-mind experience that was given them from that hurtful relationship. In other words, they sort of break apart, and then their roots are sort of in a different place, if you will. And then they're growing from their own roots. They've parented and guided with that tree, with that, you know, original host plant could not provide. So it's like being able to take a bit off and then rerouting and regrounding yourself stronger, and the other hurt and then the damage will not interfere. In other words, your definition and experience of the self, that child, is not living only in response. They're living their own life. They're then, you know, their own person. That is the journey where they will go. Once they exit out of that sort of engineered chaos that a female psychopath can create as part of the family system to get control, dominance, and sort of oftentimes a feeling of justification from hurting others and not acknowledging and recognizing it as such. So, children of female psychopaths, and before we wrap up, oftentimes they can find themselves at war or a battle within themselves and confusing pain with love and vice versa. So this can be an outcome, but you can shed that tension and you can shed that cycle. Once you sort of grow out of and away from and sort of observing more and reflecting back a little bit more about how these types of leaders, are sort of, creating a negative narrative. And so remove the negative narrative for yourself. I think that's also part of healing. It's your body, peace, and harmony. I hope these videos help. Please share, subscribe, and enjoy the membership for more great tools, videos, discussion, and exclusive videos. Have a beautiful day.